For years, Anjelica Huston was admired as a symbol of strength and elegance. But her real story was far more painful than anyone imagined. Behind the glamour were family betrayals, broken relationships, and a heartbreaking medical diagnosis that ended her dream of becoming a mother. She also faced quiet but intense tensions in Hollywood, including an uneasy feud with Oprah Winfrey and a troubled history with Bill Murray. Now at 74, Anjelica Huston is finally breaking her silence, and what she reveals changes everything we thought we knew about her life. Anjelica Huston was born on July 8, 1951, to legendary director John Huston and renowned ballerina Enrique Soma. She entered a world that looked glamorous from the outside, but felt emotionally distant from the very beginning. When she was born, her father was thousands of miles away in Uganda, absorbed in a film shoot. It took days for the news to reach him, and when it did, his reaction was chillingly detached. That early absence wasn't an exception. It became a pattern that quietly shaped Anjelica's family life and her understanding of love. Before Anjelica turned 1, her mother faced a painful betrayal. Huston not only denied S.A. role in Moulin Rouge, but he also began an affair with the woman he cast instead. Long disappearances followed, along with a trail of infidelities that left the family emotionally fractured. In 1960, S relocated Anjelica and her brother Tony from Ireland to London, seeking to rebuild stability. But complications lingered. While Huston continued his whirlwind romances, S was involved with a married man and later gave birth to another daughter, Algra, in 1964. Anjelica adored Algra, forming a deep protective bond, one that life would later put to the test in unexpected ways. While Anjelica was still a student, an opportunity seemed to arrive unexpectedly. A new film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet was searching for its Juliet at her school, and for a moment, the door appeared wide open. Anjelica wanted to step through it, but her father intervened. If she were going to act, he insisted it would be under his direction. That decision led her to a walk with love and death in 1969, a choice that would haunt her. Working beside her father was emotionally draining, and when the film was released, critics were unforgiving. Adrift, Anjelica slipped through her school years with little direction, skipping classes and chasing distraction, while her mother, Enrique Soma, remained emotionally consumed by the collapse of her own life. Then came the night that shattered everything. Anjelica was jolted awake by a family friend with news she could barely process. Her mother had died in a car accident in France. She was only 39. Grief pushed Anjelica to New York, where a new chapter began almost immediately. Harper's Bazaar requested her for a photo shoot ahead of the film's release, pairing her with the brilliant yet volatile photographer Bob Richardson. He quickly pulled her into his orbit, promising escape, devotion, and a future together. Unaware of the danger beneath his charm, Anjelica stepped into a world she wasn't prepared to navigate. Losing her mother's steady, unconditional love left a void Anjelica didn't know how to fill. In its place came Bob Richardson's relentless attention, which at first felt like safety. The imbalance between them mirrored her parents' past. He was 42, she barely 18. But beneath the intensity was chaos. Richardson struggled with addiction, had been institutionalized, and carried the wreckage of a marriage that had collapsed under its own excesses. What seemed like devotion slowly revealed itself as control. Ironically, even as critics dismissed her first film, the wider world had begun to notice Anjelica. Modeling and acting opportunities followed, and as her independence grew, the fractures in her relationship became impossible to ignore. Richardson's temper surfaced in frightening ways. Once, after she briefly left for a television appearance, he destroyed all her belongings in their hotel room over something as small as unopened suitcases. The breaking point came during a tense trip to Mexico with her father and his new fiancée, Cece. One night, after Anjelica shared a quiet drink with her father, Richardson erupted in rage, hurling a bottle at her when she returned. The message was unmistakable. When they got back to Los Angeles, Anjelica ended it. Finally stepping away from 3 years of fear, she sought refuge at Cecil's home in the Pacific Palisades, finding calm in horses, open air, and long stretches of silence. She avoided the awkward attempts to set her up until an invitation arrived for a party hosted by a rising star named Jack Nicholson. Still emotionally bruised, she was drawn in anyway. They began a relationship, uneven from the start. Both careers were taking off, forcing them into a brief long-distance stretch while she worked in London and he filmed elsewhere. Just days after she left, a friend delivered a quiet betrayal, admitting she'd slept with Jack hours after Anjelica departed. He talked his way out of it, but the trust never fully returned. From then on, suspicion was usually confirmed. Jack didn't hide his affairs well, and yet Anjelica endured them. Through it all, she felt the pull to act again. But fear lingered. She refused to lean on her father's legacy, even as she navigated Hollywood with one famous last name and a partner who happened to be its brightest star. By 1976, the cracks in Anjelica Huston's relationship with Jack Nicholson had finally split wide open. While Jack headed to New York on a carefree trip with friends, Anjelica remained in Los Angeles, drifting through parties and unresolved emotions. It was at one of those gatherings that she crossed paths with Ryan O'Neal, restless, magnetic, and visibly troubled. When Jack returned home days later, Anjelica stunned him with a confession she barely understood herself. She believed she was in love with O'Neal, and she was leaving. Around the same time, she made a determined return to acting, setting her sights on The Last Tycoon. The audition, however, became another wound. Director Elia Kazan dismissed her with a cruel honesty, telling her she lacked the beauty for the role she wanted and offering her a humiliating consolation prize instead. She accepted, stepping into a glamorous ensemble cast that included a familiar presence, Jack Nicholson. Life blurred further as she found herself entangled with both men at once. What followed with O'Neal was a nightmare she later described as living with two people in one body. Moments of charm were eclipsed by sudden violence. The abuse escalated brutally one night when he struck her during a party, enraged simply because he couldn't find her. She fled upstairs, locking herself in a bathroom, only for him to follow and continue the assault. With no adult guidance to turn to, Anjelica sought clarity from the most unexpected voice, her 13-year-old half-sister Algra, who offered a simple, devastating truth: leave. Disillusioned after The Last Tycoon, Anjelica stepped away from film for 5 long years. When director Bob Rafelson later offered her a role in The Postman Always Rings Twice, opposite Nicholson and rising star Jessica Lange, she accepted. Part opportunity, part unresolved attachment. The discomfort of knowing her connections had opened doors lingered, but reflection was cut short by a violent car accident. Thrown into the windshield without a seatbelt, she required surgery to repair her face. The physical pain was immense, but the realization that followed was sharper. She had spent too much of her life waiting. Approaching her 30s, Anjelica finally shifted her focus inward. She had chased love through family, through men, hoping it would anchor her. Now, she wanted something that belonged solely to her. She studied, took small roles, and survived without leaning on famous names. Then came an unexpected offer, Prizzi's honor. The proposal was complicated. Jack as her co-star, her father as director. She resisted, then relented, only to be insulted during salary negotiations. Told she had no real talent and was present solely because of who surrounded her. Once, those words would have crushed her. This time, they ignited something else. Anjelica Huston didn't retreat. She stayed and proved definitively that she belonged. Out of the 8 Academy Award nominations Prizzi's honor received, only one turned into a win, and it belonged to Anjelica Huston. When her name was called, the moment felt almost unreal. Instead of heading toward the press, she ran straight back to her father. Tears streamed down his face as she threw her arms around him, thanking him not as a director, but as a parent. For the first time, her success was entirely her own, and she allowed herself to feel it.